Hello, I'm Graham Jones, and welcome to Channel KT4, broadcasting live on Facebook and YouTube. You can join in by sending in questions during the show. Just press the comments button on the screen. Don't forget to click the like or share buttons. If you're watching on YouTube, please click to subscribe to Channel KT4. I'm so pleased to be able to welcome as my guest onto Channel KT4, Judy Sarssam, the chairperson of the Epsom Ewell talking newspaper. Hello, Judy, and welcome to the show. So I've got to start right at the beginning, Judy, and ask, what is talking newspaper and how does it work? Great to see you here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. The talking newspaper is literally what its title implies. We have around 100 visually impaired listeners within the Epsom and Ewell area. And in normal times, on a weekly basis, we send them out a memory stick, which contains 3 main parts. The first has all local news and things from the council and the police and the local newspapers. The second section is from a huge, big variety of magazines, all of whom have given us copyright agreements that we're able to publish articles. And there in that section, we wish people happy birthdays. We have poems very often, recipes, and often finish with jokes so that people have some laughter and fun. And the last section is podcasts. The first of those is usually from InfoSound, which is a specific channel for people who are blind. And then our editor chooses many different topics of podcasts, usually from the World Service, fascinating across all topics, all subjects. In normal times, we also have once a month a gentleman who has gathered all the events that are taking place in Epsom and Ewell, from the playhouse to the theatre, to local jumble sales, to local meetings, to keep fit classes. And so all our listeners become aware of events which are going on in the local area. We do sometimes also have interviews from local people and information. And the whole thing in normal times is prepared at Swale House on a Thursday morning. It takes about 8 volunteers each week who work on a rota, 3-monthly rota, and they prepare articles, bring them in, and we have readers who come and read the different articles, and they're recorded and a memory stick master made, duplicated, and then sent out and distributed to all our listeners. A free service of which I'm very proud.
It's very, very good. And I just showed whilst you were talking, I'll just put up again for our people who are watching. And this is a picture of the memory stick, and it looks like a little wallet that's with it. And the other picture, which I haven't put up yet, Judy, but I'll put up now, is actually the box. I presume the memory stick goes into this box, and that allows your readership to be able to listen to the articles. Am I correct in that, Judy?
Yes. It is very, very simple. In fact, I have my boom box here,
Excellent.
which I can show you. The memory stick has a little bubble at the back so that the listener can know which way in it goes into the back of the boom box, like that, into the top. And the on and off is simply this great big button at the front, on, off. And you can fast forward or go back or pause with simple controls at the top. And the charger is there, which has a square you can feel at the back, where the jack goes in, so you can charge the battery, work it off the mains, or I carry it about the house with me when I'm doing boring jobs. And they arrive in the pouch.
Yep.
The address, the listener simply takes out, feels where there's a cut-off piece, and that then goes back, and that's ready then to return back to the studio for the following week.
That's excellent. A very good description, Judy. Thank you very much for that. Now, in order to create this talking newspaper, you have to go into a studio. And so how does that work? In the studio, you've obviously got an editor, you've got somebody who's going to be helping you create it. I've got a couple of pictures whilst you're telling us about that. I've got a couple of pictures that I'm going to show of some of the work that you do in the studio.
We're very, very lucky because Swale House was the first purpose-built establishment for blind people. And so we are allowed a permanent studio there. And every Thursday morning, the volunteers turn up. We have got permanent recording equipment, microphones, etc. And we have different editors for each of the sections, and in fact 4 editors. So we have a cross section of all their different interests as well as our listeners' interests, because we're keen if anyone sends in and wants particular information. So the editor, who doesn't really edit, they choose the articles which they are going to have the readers read that particular week. And the readers then come 3 in a normal week, and our technical guys then record, balance, make a master, and that master goes into a different room where we have a duplicating stack. And the master is duplicated while other volunteers sort out all the pouches from the previous week and put the new recordings into the pouches to go to the postman to be sent off again. All the listeners have 2 pouches, so if in fact they don't get through everything one week, they do have another week. But once they don't return either of the 2, they don't get another one.
Actually, Judy, it is really, really professional, the work that goes on in the studio there. I mean, just looking at the pictures, the technology that you're using, and you've got 4 people doing the editing. You've obviously got people doing the scripting. You've got people doing the reading. I mean, this is really impressive. In fact, can I borrow some of your volunteers to come and help me run my little channel KT4? Because I could do with all the help I could get over here.
Anyway, they are a superb group.
Yeah,
superb.
They do certainly look like that. But let me just pick a little bit and ask you this. How did this newspaper start? How did it begin?
Well, the original newspaper, well, it wasn't a newspaper. After the First World War, when a lot of the soldiers came back blinded, they went to a place called St. Dunstan's, many of them living there. And somebody had the bright idea of putting onto a record, of course, that was a big record, played with a needle in a record player, a book. And then that developed into somebody in Scotland thinking, oh gosh, we could put local news onto a record. The Epsom and Ewell talking newspaper began about 45 years ago. And of course, when we started, we were on cassettes. And the cassettes were sent out in the same way as we do now, except then it was kind of done in a corridor. We didn't have the facilities that we now have. Then we moved on to CDs, and now we have the modern technology of the memory sticks. There are many, many different talking newspapers throughout Britain, and each one is unique and different. Some belong to big charities for the blind. Others, like our charity in Epsom and Ewell, are totally independent. And each one has its own unique contents, depending on the personalities and the choices of those who are running it and the listeners.
I suppose that organisations like you're mentioning large charities. I support and I sit on committees for the Army Benevolent Fund, for example, and I support, or did before lockdown, was supporting for various events to fundraise from the Royal British Legion. I'm very interested to go back to these military charities and say, are you using talking newspapers for the visually impaired? I'm very fascinated to know a little bit more about this, Judy.
Yes. In fact, it is surprising how few people know about talking newspapers. I mean, this opportunity is wonderful for us to promote it and to get more people knowing about our service.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you on the channel, Judy, and we're really our mission, if that's the right word I could use, our mission is to let people know what's actually happening in our community and whether people can benefit, firstly. Secondly, can people support? If they've got a few pennies spare, can they support financially? So there's all those bits, and we'll come on to those a little later. But I'm also very interested, of course, Thursday is coming very, very soon, and we're back to another lockdown, and we've just had the pictures where you've got your wonderful volunteers there all in the studio. How are you going to cope come Thursday for the next month when I presume you're not going to be able to get together like that? Do you do it from a distance?
Well, when the first lockdown happened, we had to close. However, when we were able to travel, Swale House, which acts like a nursing home, really, a residential home, were very kind and allowed us to have one volunteer go and weekly collect all the returned pouches. So having learnt that we could travel to do that, our editors began, particularly with great energy and determination, one particular lady, and she learned how to record at home, put that recording into Dropbox, and then our technical guy collected that, duplicated it to start with on computers, and then it was sent out by the lady who'd collected the pouches. Since then, over the weeks, they have managed to produce a talking newspaper every 2 weeks. And the other editors have come in, those who have technical know-how and can do it. Those who don't have the facility for Dropbox have sent in articles. And we are including some of the readers. In fact, some of the editors have kindly had husbands and wives who have joined in to read as well, because it's nice to have different voices picking up the different articles. So those readers then have learnt how to record either on a tablet or with a handheld recorder, put that recording into Dropbox, and the technical guys then picking it up, making the master tape, duplicating it, and then our wonderful gopher has been collected them and distributes them. So it is not as easy at all as working in the studio. They have been determined and they are doing a wonderful job.
It sounds absolutely brilliant.
We've been able to continue on a fortnightly basis, and hopefully from Thursday we'll maintain that service as long as we can go from house to house and be able to deliver and pick up the pouches from Swale House.
That's excellent. So Judy, I've picked up on one of two of the bits of things that you were saying, and of course, when you're talking about the people dropping off to the houses and putting everything, doing all of that with the memory sticks and everything, you're actually talking about VIPs, aren't you? And you're talking about so are there any other difficulties of reaching your VIPs? But I think for our audience, you need to explain what you mean by VIPs.
Well, to us, they're very important people.
Yes,
to
of
the
course.
to the rest of the world, they're visually impaired people. And of course, the difficulty with promoting our service is that people who can't see can't pick up advertisements and posters. Consequently, we rely very much on friends and family to inform neighbours and family friends who they know have difficulty with reading. So that really is, what I mean by VIP. We don't expect people to be registered blind. We rely upon their own discretion, and our volunteers take a boombox to visit that person and explain how it works, and they can see then that that person is capable of using the simple boombox to read and listen, to listen to their memory stick. It's a great disadvantage not being able to see. It's a major sense gone. You don't know where you are unless you're touching something, and you can't access the visual world. I don't think it's as bad as being deaf, but it's a big inconvenience, to be honest.
I think that's the understatement, Judy, if I may say so. But also, we were talking about your wonderful VIPs, visually impaired persons, but you also, if we use the VIPs, very important people, which of course they all are, you do have VIPs occasionally popping into the studio whilst you're doing some work, and I'm sure that they probably contribute to the talking newspaper. I'm going to put up a couple of pictures here whilst you're explaining all about that. And I've got our wonderful MP Chris Grayling is on the left of our picture, and on the right of the picture we've got the former mayor Neil Dallon. And so obviously they've come into the studio and they're big supporters of talking newspaper.
Yes, in fact, the current mayor, whoever becomes mayor of Epsom and Ewell, is automatically the president of the Epsom and Ewell talking newspaper. So they always at least pay one formal visit, and often also come join the Christmas party, whatever time they have spare, to support us. So we always have an interview from the mayor, and we are non-political, non-religious. However, Chris Grayling has been very supportive, and he has come and given us interviews and supported us. And we have had other people from Specsavers who've spoken about deaf aids and visual aids and things like that. So we do have people of interest locally who kindly come and visit us and support us.
That's absolutely marvellous. And actually, funnily enough, next week, the current mayor of Epsom and Ewell is actually coming onto my show. So, I may just mention him. I may just mention you, sorry, to him. You also then just chatted about commercial organizations, and I've got a couple of pictures of check presentations from different groups, which obviously that's one of the ways that you would raise funds to keep this wonderful talking newspaper working.
Yes, we rely on donations. And as I said, the service is free to our listeners. We do have the benefit that when talking newspapers was first instigated all those many years ago, the government brought in a law that articles for the blind should be posted free. So this is how we can maintain that free service. But of course, our funds pay for the boom boxes, the pouches, the memory sticks. And we have a turnover of about 15 listeners over the year who come and sadly go. Recently, we lost a lady who was over 100, which was a sad event. But we do rely on donations and an awareness day, which we hold in the Ashley Centre each year, though sadly not this year. But Councillor Neil Dallon was very generous and chose the Epsom and Ewell Talking newspaper as one of his charities. And that is the cheque that you see being presented there, which boosted our funds and our equipment, which then was 12 years old. We have been able to buy some new computers, new memory sticks, and I'm hoping once we get back, we can buy a second duplicating stack, which would speed up the production.
Yeah, I'm sure it will, and I think that's really good. And I'm so delighted that the mayor took such a great and keen interest in the Talking newspaper. So we've touched on some of the difficulties a little bit of being visually impaired. But let me ask a specific question here, if I may, Judy. Is that, you know, I'm sure, like all other charities and organizations, it all works because of a group of people who are a committee, and the committee get together. And so how do you manage to control and run a committee meeting within your environment, Judy?
Well, latterly we've been doing it on Zoom. However, previous to that, I was originally a representative of the listeners on the committee. And when the last chairman resigned, they were looking for a chairperson. And of course, everybody on the committee has a very important and quite a heavy workload job to do, whereas I was just talking. So they said, would I become chairperson? And I said, fool, I'm not too sure about that. But they promised support and help. They understand I can't see. So only with their support do I manage. The actual meetings, I prepare ahead of time. All the agenda and everything I put onto my computer, into my documents. And at the actual meeting, I take the computer with me, and my screen reader reads out all the different parts of the agenda and the minutes, etc. And when it comes to signing the minutes, they carefully guide me. So I write my signature in the right place.
Okay, Judy, for the viewers and for me, but for the viewers as well who are watching the program, you're talking about you're taking your computer and you've got all the information into a document. Now, I've just gone beyond my realms of technology here. So how are you reading the document? It's simple.
My screen reader.
No, okay. So what is a screen reader?
Well, I have software which is called Guide. The particular version I have is an old version, because every time technology is updated, it does more things and I find it more difficult. I'm an old lady. I'm not a technical person in any way. And the software has a very simple menu, which it reads out. And then I just enter on the particular items that I want. So I use my computer for documents, writing articles. It can scan an article and then, well, in a separate scanner, and then it can read it back to me. So I can do emails. For me, emailing is the easiest communication, because when it comes to telephoning, of course, you've got to dial your numbers unless they are automatically put into the phone. And then you've got to remember who you're dialing on what number, 1, 2, 3. So the computer is my lifeline of communication, really. My particular software is not very good on websites. It goes round and round, and I dare say a more modern version of it would be better, but much more complex. And I'm afraid, like a lot of our listeners, I'm elderly and for the young people who've been brought up with technology, I'm sure touch screens and all that are easy. However, I don't find it that easy. I have a touchscreen phone that nearly drives me mad when I'm trying to move my finger around and it keeps talking to me. So, yes, so it's the software which reads the screen as I press the right buttons.
Okay, Judy, I understand it now. So actually, it's a bit like a very clever modern form in a way of like a dictaphone. So you can dictate a document or an email or something like that, dictate it into the computer. And then when you need to, you can press a button or do something and it will read it back to you or read the answer back. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry, I'm a bit old as well, Judy. You know, it takes a while for me to get it. You know,
it's my choice. When I was 16, I taught myself on a ordinary old typewriter to touch type.
Okay.
And I have now, in my old age, found that facility very useful. And editing, and I'm careful with my emails. I listen to them and change them and alter them. And I haven't got the skill to do that with dictated emails and documents. So I use the keyboard and I type and it reads back. I'm much better, of course, where the keys are the same as they would have been on a typewriter. When I go off those letters, I'm fiddling about and feeling this and counting my way around. I've got some high marks, which my husband has put on various keys, which lead my fingers to know where I am on the keyboard. I haven't found voice control easy and reliable, to be honest. It's quicker, easier to have a physical control over it.
Yeah, I think I would be much of the same mind. I prefer to, because a lot of people, without realizing it, you learn to touch type on a laptop or something. Even people with vision do that. You know, I can do that and be looking at something else. And the more and more I spend on a computer, which seems to be an awful lot of time at the moment, the more proficient I'm becoming at touch typing. But it's fascinating to find out how this all works. Now, I know you've got an amazing group of volunteers, Judy. So I thought because I don't know where the time has gone, but we're about to run out of time for the show. But I've got a couple of pictures of a little bit of fundraising, and I'm going to put them up. One of them I only added, so I'm not sure whether it's just a picture of volunteers, and they're actually got a stand. And I think you were very delighted about having this picture because we use that as the event on Facebook. It's the Epsom New Talking newspaper with a desk, and there are 4 people with very, very smart T-shirts on. So that's the first one, the wonderful volunteers. But I like this one. I think, you should be ahead of the curve here because we are into November. And I've got this picture, and it's a wonderful Christmas picture of the team of volunteers there. And they're all smiling and they're all happy. And it's very good. So I think, like all other charitable organizations, local community organizations, it's the volunteers that make it all come together. And so, I embrace the great work that they all do. So I hope you, have enjoyed being on the show today. And I certainly have enjoyed talking with you. So, Judy, thank you for joining me in my virtual studio here on Channel 4. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you and find out all about the wonderful work of the Epsom New Talking newspaper for the blind and visually impaired. Judy, a couple of words before you go?
Well, thank you very much, Graham. And yes, our volunteers are splendid people. Wonderful. A great reflection of Epsom and Ewell itself.
Yeah, just from the photographs that I've seen, you can see that enthusiasm and energy. And whilst I'm talking, up on the screen at the moment is the webpage, so that people can go and find out more about your wonderful charity. and all the wonderful work that is taking place. So in the meantime, this is Graham Jones. Join me next time on Channel KT4, where my guest will be none other than the Mayor of Epsom and Ewell, Councillor Humphrey Reynolds. Until then, stay alert and stay safe.
You did very well.
I interrupt.